So after, I don't know, 10 minutes of technical difficulties, I finally got connected with Stephanie here. And we're, as promised, we're going to talk about dog bite because it's Dog Bite Prevention Week. And, you know, as I mentioned in the previous video, I talked about some statistics, namely that over 450,000 people in the United States get bitten every year. Of that, almost 1 million people, 800,000 plus people, have to get some medical care for that. And the two biggest age groups for getting bitten by a dog are young kids and senior citizens. And young kids are most commonly bitten in what is termed a normal everyday activity or situation like that. And so, Stephanie, the big thing that we see when we look at social media, when we look at these postings on television, we see they show pictures of kids grabbing dogs and laughing and everyone's finding it really funny and stuff. Or you see a kid grabbing a dog's tail or just diving on them, everything like that. And we're starting to recognize that that is not a normal situation. And so for our pet parents out there who have children and who may be concerned about the potential for having their wonderful pet lead to a situation where they're going to bite, what sort of signs that would you suggest that someone look for in a case like that?
Yeah, so the dog usually tells us very clearly before they actually bite that they're uncomfortable, and unfortunately we're just not educated to to see those signs. So big ones, you want to look at the ears. So ears back, obviously, the dog's telling you that they're uncomfortable. One of the best things to do is to know your dog when they're happy. What does your dog look like when they're happy? So when is our dog happy? Our dog's usually happy maybe when we're getting their food out ready to feed them, or when we're playing with their favorite ball. So really take and take that image into your head so that you know what your dog looks like when they're happy, so that anything apart from that you see differently, you can start to take notice. So a big one, like I said, ears back, pins back. Eyeballs. The dog sees something. Maybe there's a child is approaching, let's say. They want to look away from the child approaching because they're uncomfortable, but they still want to keep their eye on the child approaching, right? It would be like me if I saw a spider in the corner of the room. I'd maybe look away, but I also want to keep my eye on it. So then you see whites in the eyeballs, and we call that whale eye. So you see that a lot. You see lots of whites in the eyes. You see a whale eye, you want to move away. A tight mouth, right? When we know that our dogs are happy and having a good time, a lot of the times they look like they're smiling. All of a sudden, if that mouth changes and it's tightly closed, they're uncomfortable. The muscles around their mouth look tight. Tongue flicking. So the mouth will usually get very tight, and then all of a sudden they start flicking their tongue out. That's called tongue flicking. All of those signs, they're telling you. It would be like me saying, excuse me, Dr. T, I'm really uncomfortable here. Really uncomfortable. Could you just move back? Right? So that's basically what they're saying at that point. They're not shouting it out from the rooftops, like in the case of maybe when they do bite, right? When they're actually screaming and saying, I told you, I warned you. So these warnings, unfortunately, like I said, we're just not educated. The public is not educated. So then people will say, well, the dog bit out of nowhere. No, they didn't. They tried to move away from your child first. Your child went over to rub him or to hug him, and the dog tried to move away and your child didn't let him. Then he hugged him and maybe the dog froze. So you can feel the dog's muscles tense up. All of a sudden, right under your fingertips, you just feel this tense dog and they just stiffen. So a frozen dog, right? A dog that's not moving, a frozen dog, tail tucked, ears back, whale eye, tight mouth, tongue flicking, wide yawns. So some of these behaviors, we'll call them displacement behavior. So dogs yawn, right? But under a circumstance, let's say where there's maybe 26-year-old kids running around at a birthday party and your 3-year-old lab is standing in the middle of it and kids are hanging all over him and it's 2:00 in the afternoon and he's yawning. He's not tired. There's a heck of a lot of stimulation going on there. He's uncomfortable. That's a displacement behavior. If he were laying on his bed at 9:30 at night, getting ready to go to bed and he's yawning, that makes sense. But if you start to see some of these behaviors that are like, what is he doing? That's just out of context. Maybe all of a sudden he sits down and he starts scratching for no apparent reason. He's telling you something, telling you that they're uncomfortable. So, bites don't come out of nowhere most of the time. unless maybe, let's say, people have been punishing the symptom. So if let's say a dog does give a little growl, a little grumble, someone's the kid's hugging the dog and the dog growls, and the parent reprimands the dog, and the dog learns, oh, well, I can't tell these people that I'm uncomfortable. So we got rid of the symptom, the growl. So then we just keep on hugging and hugging because we assume the dog's okay with it. And then the dog goes, nope, not okay, still not okay with it. And then they bite. And then it is out of nowhere because they bypassed the warning because it was punished.
So that's your silent biter. I've had a couple dogs in the exam room were like that. We felt it was out of nowhere that they would just do something, that's interesting.
Yeah, and they may have been punished for warning before. I mean, I don't know who said it, I don't know what trainer said it, but a growl is a gift. A growl is a gift. And not that if my dog growls, I don't want to keep putting him in a situation to keep growling, but it's a gift because he didn't bite me. So I'm going to say, okay, buddy, thanks for telling me that you're uncomfortable and that you didn't bite me, so that we can work on that scenario so that he doesn't have to keep ratcheting up.
Okay. So to clarify, most of the time that pet is trying to get away.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they'll be physically trying to get away, and then all the facial expressions, the tongue licking, the whale eye, the ears are things that they will be exhibiting probably simultaneously, right?
Yeah, especially if they're kind of stuck in that situation. And one of the biggest things, especially with kids, and I love them, I have them, but I know what they're, and not all kids love dogs, but having kids that do love dogs, I know that challenge of teaching my 3-year-old son right now. Buddy, you see a dog, you don't just run up to dogs, and that's a big problem that a lot of parents allow their kids to run up to dogs that they don't know, or even dogs in their own household. I mean, my kids are not allowed to chase the dogs, and that's big. And there was another trainer out there, I don't know who coined the phrase, don't let your child become magnetized to dogs. Like dog must go see dog, must chase dog, must seek out that dog. No, it's you need to teach them that healthy respect, and it needs to be a culture shift. But I think you had said statistically the kids were bitten and under normal, like quote unquote normal every day, and that's the biggest problem. Like it shouldn't be normal. These things, they're normal to us, but they're not normal to our dogs. Our dogs don't hug other dogs. You see 2 dogs putting their arms around each other, that's a fight. They do not display affection the same way that we display affection. And children, especially children, don't understand that. They have a really hard time. So it's our job as parents and as educators and as professionals to educate the parents and children to be able to read the body language, but also shift their expectations as to what's quote unquote normal. And I do not believe that we should be able to do anything that we want to our dogs, and that's the shift that needs to happen, because a lot of parents think their kids should be able to do anything to the dog.
So I understand that small kids or kids, it's up to us. It's more train the humans than train the dog. Is there something you can do with your dog? Is it more training your dog to be used to having a lot of people around? Like how could you work on your pet so that it would make them less stressful, I guess, in a scenario, right?
Well, it's one, you should know your pet, because every dog is different, just like every human is different, and every dog has their own individual threshold. So there are some dogs who can tolerate a lot more than other dogs. Sometimes it can be breed specific, but then it's also important to remember there are always variations within a breed. So we could make a sweeping generalization and say something like, well, if you have, a Schnauzer or a Terrier, that they might tend to have a little bit of a lower threshold for things, but you could get a Terrier that has a high threshold because it's just a variation within that breed. So, but it's important to know your dog, and again, know what they look like when they're happy. I think if you get a dog as a puppy, obviously handling exercises, touching, teaching them that touching is good, but that also that's a whole nother, interview session, because sometimes we end up doing more harm than good. We're like, let's teach you that touching is good, and then we're just like, person after person after person is touching the dog, and the dog's like, I'm just over it. Quite honestly, I think it's more us reading our dogs and giving our dogs permission to say, I'm done. You know, that they shouldn't have to want to be touched at every time of the day. And, but yeah, I mean, if there are dogs that have some handling issues that will bite if someone tries to pet them, we can certainly work on that. We can build buffers. So let's say if a dog doesn't really like being touched and someone just reaches out and touches the dog, we can train things to build like a 10-second buffer before the dog bites or warns. So that's through some classical conditioning, counter conditioning, things like that. But, you know, yeah, we can help the dog maybe, but each dog has their own limit. And I think it's really primarily up to us to respect that and learn about our dog's limits and just keep them safe.
Awesome advice. The question going through my mind is, so what's your understanding of why senior citizens get bit?
Older people move differently, and that can set off a dog big time. You know, are we talking about elderly people that are, in walkers or walking with canes? You know, they have different gaits. They move differently, and that sets dogs off big time. Much more severe for an older person because they have thinning skin. So what may have been like a warning, like a little nip that maybe would have bruised a younger person, is going to puncture an older person with thinning skin. So, my guess to that would be maybe the way that they're reaching out to the dogs because they are awkward, possibly the way that they're walking, maybe because they do have something like a wheelchair or a cane or something like that.
That's great advice. That's great education. So know your dog, know when they're happy. Again, every time I talk to you, it's always about reading body language. So I always tell clients that pets are wonderful body language readers of us. So we have to actually reciprocate and become great body language readers of them as well.
Yeah. I mean, they're living human. I'm not human. Sometimes I think they are. No, but they're living, breathing creatures. I mean, they should have a right to say, nope, I'm just resting here comfortably right now. Please don't touch me. And that's a big one for kids because the dogs are laying down, they're sleeping, they just want to go over and cuddle, and the dogs just want to rest. So yeah, just learning about all of those different things that dogs aren't human beings. They just don't communicate the same way we do. So we need to figure out ways to tell people and to reach people so that they can learn how to communicate with their dogs effectively. And to be honest, kids, the dogs will come around much more to want to seek attention from the children when the children lay off.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
I know. So our viewing and listening, I know this is a Friday evening, and Stephanie has graciously taken her time out to talk to me about this. But we wanted to get this message out, and I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Appreciate it so much.
Anytime.
Okay, and remember, everyone, love your pet like they love you, unconditionally. Have a great night.